My name is Dr. Mcayla Sarno. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm a brain training expert. I'm an E.M.D.R specialist, creator of several online programs, but my mission is helping people get unstuck. And today's topic is how to avoid turning into your parents. How many people, maybe you have great parents, maybe you want to turn into your parents, and maybe this might not be the topic for you, but maybe you know somebody who is turning into their parents. First of all, it's the last thing you want to say to your spouse, that you are just like your mom, you're just like your dad. Yet we say it a lot because we notice it. But what if we are aware of it? What if that's something that we feel is happening and we don't want to? Like, how do we make it stop? And I think that's a really good topic because it's almost like saying, how can I change this very automatic habit, this very automatic response, this automatic way about me, because it's very it happens very much outside of your awareness. Obviously, we don't think to become our parents, and we don't think about the way we are in the moment, right? Is that Mindy that's here? Mindy Lahorn, thanks for joining. Finally came out of the closet. Check replay. Mango Mama, thanks for joining. Well, cool. There seems to be a lot more people that come on at 7 o'clock. Anyway, here's what's really interesting. This is just going to be a quick topic, but hopefully that this resonates with some of you and it's something that you can be aware of. It's really, really important because for some of us that we see traits about our parents that we don't want to repeat. And then if we happen to become aware that we are repeating it, it's like, how do you stop it? Because usually, just like any automatic response or habit, we don't notice that we're doing it until afterwards, and then it's too late. And then we regret it, especially when it comes to our kids. And so I figure, one of the best ways is, I always think there's only so much you can do on a broadcast, and what tools can I give them, what knowledge? And I believe very much in the science of our brain, neuroscience and plasticity, and explaining what happens up here. Because if you understand how this tool is working, then you can learn to master it so it's not mastering you. Does that make sense? It's like understanding what's happening to your brain. If you don't know what's happening, then you don't really know how to counter it or how to change things. So one of the things that I think it's important is gaining awareness. I always talk about gaining a deeper level of awareness. Why is that important? How does that help? Because everything your brain does in terms of automatic responses is because of all the information it holds. So the best way to change those responses is you need to gain more information. Your brain's not Google. If it had the information that would change this, then you wouldn't be doing the things you're doing. So you want to add more information. Did you watch State of the Union Address? Nope. I don't know if you're talking to me. I don't know what that was, but so it's gaining more. It's adding more bits of information, because everything in your brain that causes you to act certain ways, to do certain things, respond the way you do, everything in your brain, the way it holds information is little pictures and captions of pictures and scenes and images. It's all about pictures, like a map. And everything in your brain, all these pictures and maps and scenes, they all have descriptions. Which is really interesting when people don't want to think about their memories or go into their past. Your memories are not really what is disturbing. There's really no reason to think about your memories. It's the description that makes the memory upsetting or disturbing. You could have a really bad memory, have a very logical, healthy, truthful description, and actually have this bad memory really empower you today. But it's all about adding more bits of information. If I can add more information into that brain to create more of a Google fully packed system with all the information it needs, your brain will just naturally sift through that. And believe it or not, what you don't remember, your brain does. And this starts to change some of those habits. But your brain in a nutshell, for those just joining, my name is Dr. Mcayla Sarno. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a brain training expert, and we're talking about how to avoid becoming your parents. It's becoming aware, first of all. So here's why that happens, first of all. Your brain has, our brain, our minds, we've got a personality, which is a structure. And there's many ways that, many pioneers in psychology and advancement of medicine, they describe the personality. But you figure you've got, one very crucial pioneer in psychology, Dr. Byrne, who also was inspired by Freud. You've heard of the psyche having the I, the ego, and the superego. Well, let's keep it simple. The front part of your brain, the CEO part of your brain, the conscious part of your brain, it's called the adult. Okay, we call it the adult if we're going by Dr. Byrne's description. And what happens is when you grow up and you hear the way that either your parents or your caregivers or the adults in your life, the way they speak to you, or the messages you get by the way they speak to you, by the way things happen, what happens is that part of the brain, the adult part of the brain, takes all that in and then turns and repeats those same messages to parts of ourself. So in a sense, it records, just as it records memories, it records messages and conclusions and little rules and laws and everything that you heard. It recorded it. So you're just playing a recording back to your kids or to the people in your life. And yes, it's also learned behavior, but that learned behavior is because it's recorded. It learned it and it recorded it. We're dealing with a bunch of recordings in our brain. Everything is recorded. And first way to change that is obviously becoming aware that you're doing it. The first component, you guys still with me? The first component to change, and the most crucial, and I can't stress this enough, is personal responsibility, which means having the ability, because your ego will stop you, but it's having the ability to take personal responsibility, which means an absence of blame, which means, okay, this is happening. Okay, and being aware, once you can accept that it's happening, then you can start to change it. And then it's considering, okay, well, let's take these different parts of the personality, right? Let's say we've got the adult and the child part, adult, parent, child part, which is how a lot of the pioneers, which is how Freud actually describes the personality. So you figure we've got an adult part of us and we've got a child part. When you see the child part, when you play with your kids, that's the child part of you. It's the kid in you that comes out when you're being a kid with your kids, or just being a kid in general. So let's say the adult part of your personality has recorded literally all those messages and all those words, all those conclusions, all those things. It's recorded. Now it's just playing it back. So once you become aware that's happening, it's changing that language. So it's thinking, okay, well, if I've got this kid part and this adult part that's taken all these messages in, if I'm going to change this outwardly, I've got to change this inwardly first. Does that make sense? So it's imagining, well, if I got this kid part, which you see, it's changing the way you talk to yourself, which is when you're self-critical, when you're judging yourself, when you're beating yourself up, it's that recording happening all over again. So if you change the dialogue you have with your self-talk, with the thoughts that you have, that's going to change that description, that recording, and then that's going to come outwardly as a result. But all change has to start, you've heard the cliche, within, but it really is that sense of self, that part, that's what we have to change. That's the key to change, period, is don't change the defense mechanisms, don't change the behaviors, don't focus on the emotions, the fear, the worry. Focus on, well, if I've got these different parts of personality, and I know there's an adult part and a kid part, and the adult part is the one that took on the adults in your life. You basically took over their role, which is, gosh, if you don't want to be your parents, if they have certain traits you don't like, then you have to become aware that the way you talk to yourself sometimes or judge yourself, that you've taken on, you've just stepped in for them. Why would you want to do that? Is that making sense? Is that making sense to you guys? Let me see if I can see. Oops. Anita says, yes, yes, comfortable voice, yes, yes. So when you say affirmations, TJ Beek, that's a really good point. Positive affirmations is one thing. Now, this is really, really important. When we've got these parts of our personality. When you just talk to yourself and say, okay, I really am amazing, or I really am good enough, or I am these things. When you're just talking to yourself, you're just talking to the adult. You're talking to yourself. You're not talking to the kid part. Remember, the brain is full of wiring. It's all this wires and all these codes. And in order to make change, in order to make that connect, make things changes really core upward, you want to think of it in terms of, if I'm going to connect and make this a core change, then you want to actually imagine that you're talking to this kid part of yourself that you see, the kid part that you're so critical. Think of it that way, which is, don't say, okay, I'm. It's not my fault, and it's okay to make mistakes. Instead, say, okay, well, this kid part that's taken, that I see come out from time to time. Trying to keep this simple. What can I say to that part if I were doing that, if I were to imagine that? And so instead of I, always say you, which is, you and I. So this is using neurolinguistic, but it's how you're going to connect and create those changes. So you are not a bad person. You are good enough. And you don't ever have to worry, because, just giving you examples, because I am always going to see you as worthy, and I am always going to care about what you think, and I think you are amazing. So you see how it's you and I. And when you talk in those terms and imagine that it's that part, you change that dialogue. You also build up that sense of self. And you get in a habit, the dialogue, that recording now will eventually come outwards. But the way you treat others, to change that on a core level, you got to change the way you treat yourself first. And then the outward will just automatically kind of happen on its own. Does that make sense? Well, that's my scope for today. Does anybody have any questions? Sometimes it's hard. True, you make me reflect and think in a positive way. I love positivity. Thanks, Mindy, for sharing with your followers. I try to stay conscious of my thoughts and every time. You know what the challenge is for people? So just be aware of this so you don't psych yourself out and not do it. Is when we're talking to ourselves, trust me though, if this didn't work, I wouldn't tell you to do it. My thing is, I'll stand on my head if it's going to, make things change. I don't care. So this is what I always kind of share with you, is these things. So trust me, whatever it feels like or sounds like, it works. But the reason why it's really so hard for people to do this is because when we're telling this part, don't just do affirmations, because you're just talking to the part of your brain that already believes all these good things. We got to get to the other part of your personality, this back part, the back room, this part that we feel, but we're never really aware of. We just assume it's us. But where was I going with that? But you showed me how to talk to the kid part of me. I completely lost my thought. What was I saying, you guys? Affirmations. When we're talking. Oh, here's why it's that's funny. Here's why it's challenging. When we're talking to this part, we're telling ourselves these things. We don't feel it. It doesn't feel true. So we kind of we die out. Like, well, this isn't working. Because it just doesn't feel true. Well, listen, it's not going to feel true, because when we get into these negative thoughts and negative feelings, we've transitioned into this other part of our personality. And we can be we know already through research, science, psychology, we know we can be in two mental states at the same time. We can be in the present and we can be in the past. And we don't have an awareness. But you figure if you've got one foot in the present, one foot in the past, you're just in different regions of the brain, different parts of personality. How do you know which one's speaking? How do you know which one is perceiving things correctly? How do you know which one is feeling the way you're feeling? But people get psyched out because when you go through this talking to yourself with more self-compassion and empathy, it doesn't feel true. But that's because it may not feel true, because if you're in that part of that other part of your personality, then of course it's not going to feel true. It just means it's just a real indication that you are in another part, another region of your brain. You are in that part of your personality, and it's not going to feel true. That's why you want to keep doing. You want to tap into the adult part. So let's say you're thinking, for example, I'm not good enough, and you're beating yourself up. It's all, I always mess up and it's always my fault. And you're trying to tell this part, everybody makes mistakes. You're amazing. Don't worry about it, because I've got things covered. I'm taking over. I'm the adult part, blah, blah, blah. And if it doesn't feel true, you're just in that part. But you want to tap onto, where are you in your life where you're really feeling like you're in the present, you're in the adult part. Usually it's like when we're at work, when, it's when we're feeling most confident, most like a parent. Maybe it's when you're with your kids, or when you're into your work and you're in that zone. But you want to be able to tap into the adult part of you so that you can feel more authentic when you're talking to these parts. So just think of it like this. Okay, I'm going to tell myself, I want to talk to this part that's feeling not good enough, or that's beating themselves up, because so I can change this dialogue so that I don't turn into my parents, so that if I change this dialogue with myself, it's going to change outwardly. You want to tap into, well, even if I don't feel like this is true, then what would, if I think of myself when I'm with my kids, okay, I'm definitely, yep, now I'm thinking about that. I'm into my parent part. Now I feel like the parent, I'm adult. You transition into this other part of your brain. Just think about those moments when you're in that adult part. Okay, now if I'm in that part, even if I don't feel like it, what would that adult or parent say to this kid or this part that's feeling not good enough? So don't psych yourself out if it doesn't feel true, because it may not. You might just be in that part. But that's kind of the gist of it. I know I am a supervisor leading a lot of kids. Oh, well, this will be great stuff to know and work with them. Thoughts on NET therapy? NET therapy. I don't know that I've heard of that. You have to give me the full description of that. Does anybody have any questions? And hopefully this was helpful. What would you suggest to build more self-awareness, tips and tricks? That's a really good question, Joe. One of the ways you can gain self-awareness, or better yet, a dual awareness of when you're in this part of you that's being like your parent, is if you notice times where what you're feeling is out of context, then you know that you have that awareness of, oh yeah, okay, I've got one foot in the present, one foot in the past. Because if what you're feeling doesn't fit the current circumstances, then you know that then it's just becoming aware, and you know that you're in two places, you're in two mental states, which is a really good practice too. You could even practice by, if you think of a time in the past, which is everything outside of now, and if you think of it where there's heightened emotion, either you're really, really happy or really sad, or whatever the feeling or emotion is, if you think of that, you can feel the emotion. Well, that's creating awareness and dual awareness, which is a really amazing skill. Trust me, it's like everything. And it's noticing, oh, I'm here now, but even when I think about this, I can feel these feelings that go with this past place. So that's creating that self-awareness. But the best thing you can do, Lee, that's awesome. The best thing you can do is, I was talking to a group with Jeremy Bellotti, who got this amazing TED Talk program. And that's my bucket list to do a TEDx talk or TED Talk, not to be too ambitious. And best thing you can do, the best practice to becoming self-aware, the way that I gained this awareness, was thinking about the way you think, building metacognitive skills, which is what we do in elementary school. When the teacher's constantly prompting us to think about the way we think, learning to think big, take the way you think and challenge it. That's creating self-awareness. Always investigate what you're thinking, what you see, to determine is this real or not? Is this a perception of the adult, or is this a perception from the past? but it's always learning to think big. I like to take everything that I know and I like to turn it inside out and see it as meaning something else. I love to look at everything that way, but that's gaining a deeper level of awareness. Your brain, if you don't do this, if you don't challenge the way that you think, your brain will not give it permission to grow. It'll actually stop growing. Plasticity shows us that the brain actually grows, which is really amazing. And if you don't challenge your perception all the time, be curious about the way you think, stalk your perception. If you do that, your brain will constantly give itself permission to keep evolving and growing. So it's really important. Anyway, hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Any last questions before I hop off? Mind-body technique for finding and removing neurological imbalances. I haven't heard about that, but there's certainly a lot of that going on these days with those sort of techniques and getting your brain waves on a more, what's the word? Not homeostatic. I can't remember what it is, but a lot of brain zapping, a lot of therapists out there, but I haven't heard of that. I think we have a lot of kids with kids, and they have to work, and they're letting the world do their interesting psychics. I see us all. I see everybody as we're all a bunch of kids wearing adult zip-up suits. What does it mean to be in the present? Being in the present is being in the here and now is having the ability to. Well, yeah, that's a really good question. Do I meditate? I want to forget that question. I meditate for like maybe 5 minutes a day if I'm lucky, and that's been a long time. What's a good way to, it's funny because we strive so much to be present, but yet we avoid it so much too. And everybody's trying to meditate and get in the here and now and be present. But if you're not in the present, where do you think you are? Where are you now if you're trying to get in the present? That's a good way to gain that dual awareness. It means you're in the memory. You're in this other part of your brain. Heard of Dr. Carolyn Leaf? No, but that sounds familiar. Eckhart Tolle, definitely heard of him. Being in the present is having the ability to accept, let me keep it simple, to be okay with what you think, what you feel, whatever needs to come up. When you're able to just accept your thoughts and feelings, you're in the present. It's having the ability to have an awareness when you're in another part of your brain, when you're in the past. A lot of people say, I don't like being in the present because the minute I start to meditate, which is really interesting, the minute I start to meditate or I stop or I slow down, then everything starts coming up, and so I try to avoid it. You're not in the present. If you're in the present, then you don't feel all of those negative things. Being in the present is where you feel peace, satisfaction, your happiness. When you're at your best, that's what you feel like when you're in the present. If you stop and you slow down, it's not because you're in the present, you're feeling and thinking everything. It's actually an indicator that you're actually in this other part of your brain, your personality, you're in the past, you're in the memory. Because otherwise, when you're in the present, you don't feel all of those things. Does that make sense? Thank you, needed this. Looking forward to replay. Does present equal only focus on positivity and positive forward movements? No, not in my opinion. Being in the present, switch on your brain. That would be interesting to read. Being in the present is just having the ability, I think, having the ability to know when you're not in the present allows you to be in the present, because most of the time we're in our memory network. We get pulled into the memory, which skews our perception, and all of our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts, it's all coming from that place. So I think having an awareness when you're in the memory is the only way you're going to get out of it, to get in the present. It's kind of like the only way to get out of a dream when you're dreaming is you got to have a lucid dream experience where you suddenly become aware you're in the dream. And then once you are, it's like, oh, now you have the ability to wake yourself up. But unless you know you're in the dream, you can't wake yourself up. So it's knowing when you're in the memory. And when you can notice that by such as, is what I'm feeling fit the context? Does this make sense? Or is it a little bit over the top? Oh, it's in the memory. When you notice you're in the memory, then you can wake yourself up and be in the present. Please answer my question. What's the question? Salem 198 AD. I'll look for it again. Here is a question. Who do you watch on Periscope? Well, I watch, well, I don't, how to be honest, I don't watch that much, but I watch Chalene Johnson. I like to catch those that talk on spiritual platforms. Mindy Lawhorn, if you're not following her, she talks and shares a lot about faith and hope and spirituality. I don't get it on that much, to be honest with you. I'm not on social media that much. I really like to read and I like to write, and I'm usually doing my work so much. Michelle Myers, that's who I was trying to think. I've actually heard Michelle Myers too, who's great, and I like to listen to anybody that's really, really just authentic. So if you have anyone, obviously I follow Jeremy Bellotti, does his TED Talks, and he's great too. Where was the person? Oh, I can't sleep at night and I feel that everybody hates me and my father passed away. Is that true? Well, that's a pretty deep question. Is it true? I'm not sure what you mean. Well, the reality, I mean, if your father's passed away, then, there's some reality there. But anytime you're feeling something out of context, just remember, if it's out of context, that means you're in the memory. And the memory isn't real. And what I mean by that is, yeah, it happened, but it happened in the past. It's not happening anymore. So it isn't real. All that's left today is a recording. So what you're feeling, what you're thinking, it isn't real anymore. It's not happening anymore. The reality of the circumstances, certainly that happened in the past, but what you're thinking and feeling isn't real if it's not fitting the context. So if you can't sleep and you're feeling worried or anxious, then if you look around your bedroom, unless your bedroom's on fire, there's really no reason to feel worried and anxious. Then you're in the memory and it's not real. And when you have that awareness, you kick yourself into the present, and that's a good way to get present. Everything in the present is when you're at your best. Anyway, I got to get home to the kiddos, so it was great. Thanks, guys, for jumping on. I hope all that was helpful. So bottom line is, you don't want to turn into your parents. You got to change the inner dialogue in order to change that on the outside. You got to basically reparent yourself. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, guys, have a great evening, and we'll talk soon. Okay, bye.